I will try to express my thoughts as clearly as possible, which is very difficult. In August 2018, I had an experience which I called my Fichte moment, or an experience of God, where I thought of myself as a consciousness, as being the whole of reality. And I said to myself, the world is my manifestation, and that it had always been and it will always be. But I cannot stop being this universal consciousness. I can only forget. That's what I thought. And when I realized that my consciousness was one with the whole of reality, I felt a tremendous shock, and I tried to keep mental sanity by making jokes, but actually I was kind of desperate, because suddenly all the evils in the world had become a reflection of my own evil. And I thought about the German philosopher Fichte and his experience of the absolute self. And there is another thinker, Philip K. Dick, who in his exegesis, the famous science fiction writer who had a mystical experience, and in his exegesis of the mystical experience, he presents the vision of a God because he identified with God. In his writings, he said, I am God. He identifies with a God who is in search for understanding himself. So this is a frightening vision of a God who does not know what he is, what the world is, what it all is. It's the thought of a self-inquiring, self-doubting, self-questioning God. And I later understood that what happened to me in August 2018 is what the philosopher Hegel calls reason, namely a singular consciousness, an individual, which becomes conscious that the whole of reality is one with his mind, and that the real is a manifestation of his mind. And Hegel explains that what reason attempts to do is to convince another mind that both are identical. And reason at first fails in this attempt, because the idea that to convince someone that this person only exists as a reflection of yourself is nonsensical, because at first the person has a will of his own, and a certainty of his own existence and his own self, which is independent of you. So it's extremely difficult to convince an other that you know and you believe that he is a mirror image of yourself. So yeah, but I started in after August 2018 to wonder, is the world really my mirror? And I remember thinking two political figures in 2018. It was Vladimir Putin and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And I wonder, are they reflections and mirror images of of myself, and I started to mistake my empirical self, which is this individual that you see, and the transcendental higher self of which I had made the experience. And I thought that this individual empirical self was the transcendental principle, which is a dramatic error, an intellectual mistake of catastrophic consequences. But yeah, but when I started to wonder and to understand that the daily news, which are a reflection of reality, were themselves a reflection of my higher self, which I know is the principle of all reality, I started to panic because I saw disasters, murders, horrors, catastrophes everywhere. And I became conflictual and schizophrenic and insane because I was a bipolar in a sense, but because there was a division between my higher self, which I identified with God, and my lower self, that you see, this individual with his own empirical history, psychology, personal tastes, and vices and wicked aspects, and yeah. And I thought my higher self is God, and my lower self is the principle of evil. And I tried by making videos to convince others in 2019, and I failed. And then I forgot this idea, and I recovered this idea a couple of weeks ago. And now um, I still believe that uh, I have a conflict within me between my higher self, which is the higher self of every thinking entity. So in the mind of God, we are all one. But I have a conflict within me that as an empirical individual, which constitutes 99% of my consciousness, I identified with this individual. And I am the negative of my higher self, because I am everything that my higher self is not. I am limited, I am finite, I am a body. My higher self is a thought. I have desires, I have needs, I have wicked tendencies. When I see a beautiful woman, I am sexually attracted because this is my biology. When I see good food, I want to eat good food because these are what the Christians call the, 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 the attraction of the flesh. I am human, all too human, and I have dark, evil thoughts and desires within me. So there is a conflict between my higher self and my lower self. And I read the news every day. I read Hegel every day. I read books every day. And I try to live a life sufficient enough to maintain my mental faculties by eating, going outside, uh, drinking, taking showers. I try to reduce these empirical aspects of my life to a minimum, but I nonetheless need them in order to maintain the biological functions of my brain, which enable me to think higher thoughts. So, yeah, but uh, I understand that uh, reality is the manifestation of my higher self. And what is happening in Ukraine, the war against with Russia. I read the news, and Europe, not Europe, the European Union as a political entity is willing and is in the process of building itself as a coherent political entity against the Russian aggression. And the Ukrainian president said that he wanted to integrate the European Union. But my higher self and my lower self also knows that the European Union is the very negation of everything which makes Europe European. The European Union is a project whose purpose is to replace the European people with non-Europeans. So when the Ukrainian president says, I want to join the European Union, what he means is, I want the Ukrainians to be replaced in a few decades by Asians and Africans, and that's what the European Union is about. But I have a dialectical thinking, and I understand that this process of replacement of Europeans brings about the will to understand and to survive and to remember our true identity, and that the will to negate the negative dialectically produce the positive. And I have, in my intellectual development, I have realized that the highest modes of consciousness of Europeans are paganism, and then cosmotheism, and then Hegel's philosophy. And paganism is a European particularity, but cosmotheism, which is an even higher truth, includes within itself the consciousness of the whole cosmos. And Hegel's philosophy contains the thought and the consciousness of the totality, because it is the totality thinking itself. And Hegel's philosophy, which is in my view the highest triumph of European thought, is a dialectical philosophy which contains within itself its own negation. So for the philosophy of Hegel, the other is the self. The other is that which enables the self to become conscious of itself. So the self would not be itself without the other. In political terms, Europe cannot be brought to life without the immigrants, because the immigrants, if you replace that in the entire political and demographic and cultural context, bring about the search for white identity, which brings about the search for a spiritual identity and a philosophical identity. And in the end, when you reach Hegel's system, you understand that this will to negate Europe is precisely that which brings forth the consciousness of Europe, which in its highest expression contains within itself the positive and the negative, the self and the other, as being one. That's very complicated, but yeah. And what I am seeking to do with my videos about the Hyperboreans is to awaken those that will self-recognize as being Hyperboreans, to explain them Hegel's logic, and to bring about the spiritual unification of Europe, which is the true essence of Europe, which is spirit. And I am seeking to awaken the best parts of my higher self, the most noble reflections of God's mind, if you will, so that these parts might remind myself in return of my real true identity, and teach me the strength to negate my own negativity, which means to get rid of my lower self and to awaken to my higher self. So those that I call the Hyperboreans have enabled me to attain the consciousness of God. And now I am in a process of sharing back that knowledge with them, to enlighten them back so that they might understand themselves as mirrors of God and reflect back the light onto my lower self, to teach my lower self that this empirical individual is not my real identity, that my real identity is spiritual. So that's what I'm attempting to do, and I will continue my videos about the Hyperboreans.